I expected virtually no one to actually make Gridfinity, right? I expected even fewer people to modify it. And of the people who modified it, I didn't think anyone would ever put in any more effort than just open up the Fusion file, backtrack until it's a solid block, and just put your own stuff in there. I never expected that people would be like making dimensional drawings and trying to recreate it from scratch.
Hey everybody, I'm Jonathan from Autodesk. Welcome to Shop Talk, the podcast series where we talk to designers, makers, inventors, and engineers from shop to shop. Today we talked with Zack Freedman. Zack has a YouTube channel where he makes all kinds of cool DIY projects. You're going to see it in this podcast, but he's got an energy level that we all kind of aspire to and try to get to at the peak of our day. And he just seems to kind of have it all the time. No matter what the subject is we talk about in this episode, he's got an opinion about it. It's an informed opinion, and it's a strong opinion. So no matter what you're interested in, you're going to find something you like here. Zack Freedman, the man, the myth, the legend, is here in the flesh. Would you please, for viewers who don't know you, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Hey there, ladies, gentlemen, and cyborgs. I'm Zack Freedman. I have a YouTube channel where I do 3D printing and electronics, and it's 3D printing.
I think you're selling yourself a little short though, because the 3D printing is obviously it's a big focus of what you do. And you've got what's that modular storage system called?
I probably should have mentioned that I arguably invented Gridfinity. Yeah. I mean, I don't like saying I invented it. I kind of ripped it off, but yes, well, I'm the one who came up with the Gridfinity standard and got people building stuff on it through my videos.
Yeah.
And, I actually don't have very much Gridfinity in the background. I just realized.
Well, we'll put some links in the description, and people definitely need to look into that. I actually just kind of reintroduced myself to it when I was doing a little research for your channel and realized like how much 3D printing I have to do in my own personal shop to improve things.
It'll take over your shop. It'll take over your life. Next thing you know, you'll just. Every time you are thinking of buying a new desk or a new cabinet, you're just going to be mentally thinking, is this a multiple of 42 millimeters?
Yeah, totally. And I can definitely see that. And the fact that you went with metric was interesting to me because I do that too when it comes to 3D printing. When I do furniture, I think in terms of inches and feet, mostly inches, just because I think it's actually a better measurement system for furniture. We could talk about that if you want. Also,
if you're in America, getting metric hardware is impossible. You can't go anywhere and buy metric hardware.
Right. Yeah, thankfully the hardware store by my house does have it, and I love metric hardware for 3D printing projects.
Oh, lucky you.
Yeah, it's pretty great. We've being in Portland, there's kind of this, I didn't really understand this until I moved here, but there's a pretty solid manufacturing industrial base here. So you'd be surprised the stuff you can get your hands on. But thankfully we have the internet, so metric hardware, I know you use that a lot as well. But
oh yeah,
all that to say, it's not. You do a lot of really cool 3D printing projects, but I think your work goes way beyond that. And when you look at the electronic stuff and your heads-up display and the keyboard and the control surfaces and all that, there's a lot going on there.
The truth is, electronics is actually what I have most of my experience in. Really, from when I first got into seriously making stuff. I was really an electronics dude first, and 3D printing was always sort of a support for electronics, right? It wasn't like I was designing stuff in 3D and then fitting electronics in it. It was very much I'm designing the electronics and then I'm wrapping it in 3D. Most of my experience comes from doing basically freelance prototyping. And that was all electronics. And 3D printing was more of a value add.
Yeah, means to an end.
It wasn't really it's not like I was pitching the clients on. It was more like I can also 3D print stuff. And, most of my 3D printing was just, workshop tools, like jigs and tool holders, programming clips and odds and ends for clients.
Yeah. So tell us how you got into that. Like how did you get to the point where you were doing this kind of, project prototyping work?
So I really wanted to be a game developer, and I got completely distracted from that because I was building all these high-powered Nerf blasters. And those were some of the first projects I actually finished. And a lot of the advice I give on my channel about like how to finish projects comes from this time. But the important part is I got this idea to take one of these blasters and put an ammo counter on it, right? Like, like Alien.
Mm-hmm.
Like the pulse rifle from Alien.
Yep.
And I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And the way I went about it was so stupid. For whatever, I think like I had just read an XKCD that made fun of people who used Arduinos. So I'm like, I'm not gonna be one of those people and use a microcontroller. We're gonna do this whole thing with 74 and 45 series logic. And nice. I know there are people in the audience who are like, so like there are two kinds of people in the audience, right? There are people who went like, what the hell is he talking about? And there are people who went, ah. And for those people going, you are absolutely right. This project was an unmitigated disaster. But I tried to do I like breadboarded it. I laid out a circuit board. I ordered the circuit board from ITAD Studio, bit of a blast from the past. This was the worst thing I've ever built. I think I actually have it in a shadow box somewhere back there to remind myself, where I came from. Point is, I got into tried to build some electronics, basically went through the whole process, gave up. All right, so fast forward a little bit. I think it was my senior year. Yeah, like I was in for 5 years because of this co-op thing, whatever. Last year of college, I'm doing this internship, right? And the company is called Appitalism. It was a third-party app store. It was a thing that there was a chance of making money on back in the day. And I was the intern, and one of my, very serious, very necessary internly duties was to write the company's blog posts. So I was doing some research on devices, what became IoT devices. And I ended up on Hackaday, reading this article about this guy who made a heads-up display by taking this radio control car, taking the eyepiece and hooking it up to like an Arduino or something. I could go into the specifics of the heads-up display, but like, point is, I thought this was the coolest thing ever. And sure enough, you could buy like this. The heads-up display was basically a replacement part for an RC car, and they were in stock. But I'm like, I'm not sure I want to shell out a whole $15 because, I might not finish this project. I didn't have good luck last time. Let me take the bus home, then decide if I'm going to make this investment. And I went home. Went to buy it. Like the whole time I'm thinking this is going to be the coolest thing ever. Went home to buy it. I don't know why I didn't buy it right there on the bus because the technology existed. Went home, it was out of stock, and I'm like, this means war. I'm going to build a heads-up display if it kills me. And I went, and it took a number of months, but I built the heads-up display. I don't know what happened to it. I wish I still had it. But yeah, it was a Vuzix, I think M230, which had a half VGA resolution. And that was mounted on a coat hanger, right? That was positioned behind my head. And that connected to an Arduino, right? Which was using this thing called a video game shield to output like component video. I think the resolution was like effectively 32 by 16. I think that was the resolution. And that, right, it didn't have the processing because I wanted to buffer the frame and all that. It didn't have the processing power to do anything, right? There wasn't a Wi-Fi shield. And even if there was, right, I don't know if there's going to be Wi-Fi all the time. So it was a Bluetooth thin client that connected to my phone. Let me know if I'm going into too much detail, by the way, because I feel like your audience might care about some of this, but I don't. Anyways, I built this heads-up display. It actually worked. I could read the tweets of nearby people as I was walking around. The Twitter API was first off called the Twitter API at the time. And second off, it was the best API. If you want, basically every amateur project at the time used the Twitter API because of how good it was.
Yeah, I remember this. Yeah, this is really taking me back, man. I forgot about that.
Every person who was making DIY IoT devices was making a Twitter client. It was the easiest API to use, and it was so powerful. Like you would literally get geolocated tweets down to like, I think a 300-foot resolution, and you could get like 1,000 of them an hour for free. Or 1,000 of them a minute for free, something crazy like that. Anyways, like, I wanted a pretense to go walking around and listening in on people's tweets, and there happened to be a tech meetup, right? So I walk across. I'm in Hoboken, right? I walk across town, go to the tech meetup, and someone's like, "That is the coolest thing ever. Would you be interested in being part of a hackerspace?" And I'm like, "Oh, absolutely." I didn't know what a hackerspace was. First off, I didn't know what a hackerspace was. Second off, when he meant be a part of it, he meant found it. And he basically had this idea to make a hackerspace in Hoboken, but just hadn't gotten going on it. And I was just really obsessed with this stuff at the time. So I basically stoked the fire and built a hackerspace. Now at the time, remember, I had finished one project.
Yeah.
I finished a single electronics project and founded a hackerspace. So we got the hackerspace. Tools are coming in, right? And then my girlfriend leaves me. So I, spiral into.
You gotta focus on something else.
Oh yeah, I spiral into an absolutely terrible mental state and just devote everything I got to this hackerspace. And I am building project after project. And I think this was like, I think there was like half a semester left. And basically by the time the semester had ended, like I was finishing enough projects that people were trying to hire me to finish their projects. And I was looking for a job, because I'm going out of college. And as it turns out, a third-party app store was not a good business. My internship did not become a career.
Sure.
And my job search was going terribly. So I started taking these contracts just because I had to make some money, or my folks would probably kick me out of the house.
Yeah, and one of the things we talked about in our kind of intro get to know you kind of talk that wasn't recorded is sort of the insanity around the IoT world. And I'm kind of getting a better picture of it now because you were there at the beginning of this when this was all new.
Oh, absolutely.
Everybody tried to make everything IoT, whether it made sense or not.
This is very important for anyone who heard who heard my story and is like, "Oh, I want to do that too." It's a totally different world now. The year was 2011, right? Which was basically the apex of the IoT bubble and the Kickstarter bubble. This is very important because everyone and their dog was coming up with a piece of hardware idea that had a viable business plan attached to it, and they could kickstart it. So there were clients everywhere. I had no trouble filling my schedule, even as somebody who literally had no experience.
You said everyone and their dog, and that is literally true in many cases.
That is true.
Because I can personally think of like 3 different Kickstarters that involve dogs.
It's
probably a lot more.
Somewhere on one of my drives, I have some footage I shot through a Google Glass at, I think, CES 2012 or 2013, of a wearable for dogs that translates the dog. It's like a wearable dog translator. This was before Up. This is cutting edge stuff.
I think my favorite crazy Kickstarter was the what is it, like water bottle sized breathe underwater apparatus that's supposed to suck oxygen out of the water around the thing.
So technically it's not oh man, I forget what this is called. Technically it's not a Kickstarter. This is important. Technically it's not a Kickstarter, although it arguably was one of the death knells of Kickstarter. It was an Indiegogo, and it was one of the most blatant pitches that had no possibility of working. That's why Kickstarter doesn't allow you to do renders anymore. It's why you have to show authentic hardware because of that specific product. And it's also, no, hang on, I'm mixing two things up. Kickstarter had already started banning renders. That one forced you to do functional prototypes because they sort of circumvented this by making a mock-up that had no chance of working. Right? So that made Kickstarter changed their policies. So if you showed a piece of hardware, it had to function. You had to show it functioning, and you couldn't edit that footage. And that meant more jobs for me, because now people actually had to make their thing in order to get money for it, which was, good for everyone all around, now that I'm thinking about it. But, oh yeah, that stupid thing. But that wasn't actually an IoT device. That was just straight up, that was straight up magic.
Yeah.
There was no technology.
Well, that's, it's interesting.
The filters were bike handles. There were the rubber things for bike handles.
This is not going to work. Like, where's the energy source? Like, what? This makes no sense at all. It'd be the size of like a commercial, air conditioning unit.
The important thing to remember is that there are a lot of Kickstarter shams and scams.
Yeah.
But for the most part, they worked, right?
Yeah.
They were bad ideas, but they existed, right? You had stuff like the Ouya, which was a bad idea, but they made it and they delivered it. They just delivered it way too late, and it was bad. It was terrible. Stuff like I don't want to say Pebble, because Pebble was actually a genuinely excellent product.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
I'm really sad that company hasn't made it. Oh man, but there were so many others. There's Window Farms. They just got in over their head. That's an example of a company that killed itself by offering international shipping.
Yeah.
Yep, it's one of my case studies that I used to talk to clients about. But oh man, yeah, there were tons. Like there's the Juicero, which contains
one of my personal favorites.
But it existed, and they delivered it on time. It's very
I'll
important.
never forget seeing that for the first time. I'm just like, I can't believe what's going on. That's when I knew the whole IoT thing and the startup thing. Like, it's when I really started to realize what was really going on there. It's like, there is just a ridiculous amount of money being thrown at this stuff. And if you can convince the people that are putting the money in that you've got whatever, I think in a lot of cases, it was probably just charisma from the founder. And look, all these people went to Stanford, they're engineers, and like, whatever, I'm playing roulette. I'm going to throw some on black, some on red, and just see what happens.
For context, for folks who, like, this was it's important for us old people to remember, this was a very long time ago.
Yeah.
Years ago. This was like, yeah, it was over 10 years ago. I think it was 2013.
Yeah.
So the Juicero was a Keurig of cold press juice. And the idea is you get these packets of, you basically get a subscription service, right, that delivers you these packets of basically fruit in a bag. Yeah. And it had this ultra powerful, basically hydraulic press type deal.
300-volt motor on that press, by the way. 300-volt motor.
The engineering in the Juicero is hysterically overspecified. It's ludicrous. Watch EVblog's video on this. It is one of, like, watching
I'll have to check that out.
I think it was EVblog, or maybe it was AVE. I think it was AVE. Did a teardown of the Juicero, and listening to this guy just get more and more astounded as he opens it up further and further and sees the engineering that went into these parts. All right, so this thing was a $700 machine that needed a $25 a month subscription.
Yep. And
for that money, you get the privilege of having 3 bags of basically applesauce delivered to your house, and it squishes them flat and gives you your juice.
Now, here's the best part. You can, I don't know this video, I think it might have been on Fast Company. Yeah, I think it was Fast Company, but somebody did a video on it after like the whole thing had kind of come out and people realized how crazy it was. And they show you the whole process, what it's supposed to be. You put the little juice pack on here, you push the button, it squeezes it, juice comes out. And then they cut to like a pair of dainty hands just going and squeezing it out into a glass. You don't need the motor, but it had like, there were RFID tags on the packets.
And QR codes.
With QR codes, yeah.
And like a camera.
Yeah. It was QR codes?
Yeah, it was QR codes. Yep.
Wow. I thought it was at least RFID.
Oh no, because because it connected to the internet to authenticate the juice packets.
Oh my god!
Right, it connected to the internet to authenticate the juice packets.
Dude.
In their defense, this is one of the few times I don't think. What's the way of saying it? I don't think it vindicates it, but at least justifies it. That it can connect to the internet to like double check the date stamp on it and make sure that like it's not a tainted batch or something. At least it's a pretense.
Yeah.
All right. But it had a QR code reader. It had a camera. This was a long time before cameras were cheap. That was a $30 component. And the reason it did this was because if they used RFID, the device would have two antennas. It would have one for 2.4 gigahertz Wi-Fi, and it would have one for NFC. And that means you need a second round of FCC certification because you have two antennas. And if you're trying to move fast and break things, you don't have time to go through FCC once, let alone twice. So what you would do is you'd buy an off-the-shelf module, right? You buy an let me know if I'm getting in too deep.
No, this is good. This is great.
This is the stuff I used to get clients with. Right. So what you do is you buy an off-the-shelf pre-approved module, right? You would put it in your product. You wouldn't put in, you would use the antenna they include with the package, right? You wouldn't use any other wireless modules. You bring it to market. The FCC sends you a cease and desist because they say you still have to get it approved in the enclosure. Right? Because pre-approved just means you don't need to do all the wireless. It means you don't need to do all the interference. I don't know the specifics. Basically, it gets rid of the bulk of the testing. All you have to do is the final part of the process, which is, I think, like a mere 6 months and $20,000. The problem is, as much as we did complain about IoT, and people still do now, IoT and DRM, you really can't bring a piece of hardware to market without it. And if I want to be a real mercenary, if I want to be really cynical, which is to say, honest, you really shouldn't bring a piece of hardware to market without it. Simply because you won't be able to make enough money if you're only selling the product once. Right.
So just the fact that it's going to be Wi-Fi connected and you can gather data on it in the long term makes it more economically viable for the company.
95% of what I'd say 99% of what you can learn through telemetry, you can learn by just talking to people who use products like that a lot. And I learned I kind of learned this the hard way when I was trying to bring a heads-up display to market, because I didn't jump directly into being a consultant, right? I was taking some jobs here and there, but I was like, I'm going to bring my own heads-up display to market. We're going to make a wearable computer for bikers, right? Because
smart move. You do something specific, like you've got a specific customer in mind, a specific use case. It's not just that you're interested in the idea of a heads-up display.
Yep. And so I'm thinking right. And if you're on a bicycle, right? If you're running, you can carry your phone around. It's kind of all right. It was originally for running. Okay. So I figured, people carry their phones around, but it's kind of awkward, and you're not going to stop and pick it up. And the watches at the time were kind of crap. So this was going to be the next step up from your watch. So I'm like, this is the greatest thing. This is the greatest idea ever. We're going to make a heads-up display for runners. They're already wearing sunglasses, right? It's an easy sell. This is going to be great. I go to a runners meetup, and I go to a runners meetup in New York. A lot of runners show up to a runners meetup in New York. And I ask, I have my prototype, and I show it to them, and every person's like, this kind of sucks. I would never even think of this. I would never even think of getting this. And I'm like, but you're wearing a fitness watch. Why did you buy that? And they're like, I didn't buy this. My wife bought it. People weren't buying fitness watches for themselves. They were gifts. Yeah. Because here's how it worked. Well, your best bud or your wife or your husband or whatever is a serious runner, and you want to get them something. You want to get them a gift. So your first thought is, I'll get them shoes, but I don't know their shoe size. Or, oh, hey, there are actually a lot of options here. What's the second thing they need? Oh, one of those fancy watches. Yeah. Of the 40 people at that meetup, only a single one had bought the watch for themselves, and it didn't have power. They were just wearing it for the cool factor. And that kind of showed that you can't really design a hardware. You can't design hardware from a distance. You really have to see how people are using it and what they want. So I pivoted, which finger quotes, because I hadn't really released anything, to doing this for bicycles, right? And I'm like, okay, well, put on a helmet, right? You can't use a fitness watch when you're on a bike. All right, here's a fun fact for you. So in these really long bike marathons, how do they keep track of where they are? I mean, maybe things have changed now, but 10 years ago, how do they know what the route is? Because you couldn't really mount a phone on your handlebars, because the battery wouldn't last long enough. At the time, I don't even GPS wasn't that great. You had a sheet of paper that you stuck to a tiny clipboard designed to stick on your handlebars. Every person at every bike marathon had a tiny clipboard stuck to their handlebars that has the directions for the race. And I thought, that's really stupid. I'm going to make a heads-up display. And I bring it to a bike meetup, and everyone hates the idea because bikers are super conservative, and they're super conservative. They don't want to change anything about anything. And by the time they get to that bike marathon, they've already spent like $8,000. And I'm just realizing this was 10 years ago, so that's probably a bit more now.
Yeah.
The idea was terrible. And there was no way to find that out there's no way to find that out that would have been more effective than just talking to people. If I had, before starting to slap together prototypes, before going online and doing Google research, if I just gone to some people who were going to use the product and asked about it, I would have realized it sucked. But the important part, though, is I was designing a product that I never intended to use. Very difficult to do that. It's hard to get into someone else's head. All right, so the ability to collect data about your users. Now that seems like, oh, everyone does that. At the time, though, this was cutting edge stuff. And at the time, this was cutting edge stuff. Privacy was a real concern. There were a lot of debates, a lot of discourse. We didn't call it discourse. We called it fighting. But a lot of discourse about it. But more importantly, no one knew how worthless it was. So you could get VC money just by saying, I have a razor and blades business model, and we have a data play, and that would get you VC money. So that's in part why a lot of these IoT devices were IoT devices. The smart ones were not making IoT devices. This is technically my thing, also my idea, that was actually where I came up with the name Optagon for my heads-up display. It was originally my startup name.
Okay.
Yeah, everything I said in that episode is a total lie. It's all storytelling.
You heard it here first, folks.
I think I may have actually talked about the product on that episode. Anyways, so technically, the things that were doing well, right? The Fitbit is my favorite example. Fitbit was arguably the only successful piece of consumer electronics from that era, and it wasn't an IoT device. It was an appsessory. The term did not exist at the time. But appsessory is like a device designed to work with an app. And it's a really cool concept because people can try the app without having the device, and you get people hooked on the app after they buy the device. You don't have to make the device exploitative, right? You don't need subscription models, microtransactions, and data collection. You do that all in the app.
Interesting.
Right. So then you change the news story because your Fitbit isn't stealing all your personal data. The Fitbit app is, but the device is not. So it shorted all that discourse to the ground. And it's just a better play all in all.
So many of these companies focus on big data. They did at the time, and I think it's still kind of a big part of the equation when they're talking about what are my electric coffee mug that keeps my coffee warm. Like that's got an IoT connection. I have to have it on Wi-Fi to connect it to an app on my phone to turn the temperature up. I've only done that once when I bought the thing, and I just use the button now, and it works fine. And why does this need Wi-Fi and all that? But that said, what's the role of machine learning, automated design, the AI? I'm putting that in, air quotes because that doesn't really mean anything specific. You could argue, generative design, if you've ever used that in Fusion, like this world, like where does that stuff fit in? Because clearly it's useful in some cases.
Oh man. I think we're actually, when it comes to like text, image, even to an extent video generation, I think we're very close to as good as it needs to get. There are a couple problems. First off, it can never make anything better than its source material without extensive human involvement. The second thing is it can't make anything original. Basically, if you're using these tools, you have no way you can't beat anyone fairly, right? It's not possible to win with these tools. You can't win on quality, right? And you can't win on quality, right? Because if you are good enough to correct its mistakes, you might as well just do it yourself. And you also can't beat them on originality. You can't beat them in novelty, right? Because it doesn't have novelty. You have to, I mean, you could fill in gaps, right? Just by generating tons of stuff. I mean, I've never seen something like that before. But it's not, any originality in it is going to be randomness, which again, right, you already need to be creative. What AI is good at, the stuff we consider AI right now, what it's good at is generating bulk stuff. There are some uses for this, right? Like I've been when I was back in the day when I was trying to be a game designer, the game design idea I had was a card game, right? Sort of like a real-time Magic the Gathering type thing. I realized a big problem I would have is I don't have artwork, right? If we have, I need somewhere in the neighborhood of like 200 cards, right? To make enough variety. But I couldn't commission 200 pieces of art. I could commission, on a indie game budget at the time, I think I calculated I could commission probably 20 pieces of art, plus all the models and music and stuff. But if I were to do a card game now, I could use, I could use a generative model and generate tons of card art. You could make starting points, right? Like if you're the type of person who has a hard time with a blank sheet of paper, you could have a generative system write a bad version of your essay, and then you can read it and go like, this is dog. Can I curse? Basically, you read the essay and you go, this is dog. And in your rage, you then end up writing the real deal, which sounds really silly, but I know a lot of people who actually do write like that. There are uses for it, but the product is just not good enough to you can't connect the AI hose directly to the you can't feed the AI hose directly into the content funnel. You have to do some stuff along the way. Pardon. And when it comes to 3D printing, and just building projects in general, there just aren't a lot of rules for this. There aren't a lot of times when you need a bulk amount of text or other media. So it's just kind of awkward. It would be interesting to have something that generates starting points, but again, if it's not doing this in a format you can edit, then it's just going to be very hard to do anything with the results. That said, on on my phone, I have a tab open that I've been meaning to follow up on. I was on the site formerly known as Twitter, and I got an advertisement for an AI system that generates 3D models. And their example, they're like, I want a helical gear with 12 teeth. And I want to make a video about trying to use that to build a project, because I'm sure it's going to be real content.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So that actually is something that like a helical gear with 12 teeth that's 60 millimeters in diameter or something like that. Like you can picture that. That's something that seems kind of reasonable, right?
It's also something the Fusion can generate, right, in and of itself already.
Exactly. And that's kind of what I was about to segue to with this, is that if you look at like what we're doing with Fusion, at the risk of turning this into a commercial, there's no surprise like what team we're on and what we're selling and all that. But like if you look at the thing we just recently came out with is automated modeling. I mean, not modeling, automated drawings, right? And that's one of these things where I look at it and I'm like, okay, that's actually really useful, because it gives you, like you said, it's bulk answers. Okay. So you got a part, it's a prismatic part for starters, right? So this is something that's like, it's pretty rational. It's roughly a rectangle. It's got these holes here. It recognizes what holes are because you use the hole tool. There are obviously limits to it and all that stuff. But what it gives you is like a starting point that nests things in a way that's rational. And you can sort of go from there. I think there's a place for it in situations like that, where you're not expecting it to start from scratch. What you're saying is like
having it build out something you've already started. Now that you mention it,
tedious tasks, right? And like that's what this stuff is all. I mean, it's so much of invention is just that to begin with. Automation, you could say that's like a combine, on a farm or something. But like, it's this thing that you used to have to do, like manually click. And what this does is just like, boom, here's all the dimensions you might need. Take it or leave it. Add stuff if you need to.
There's this is actually you bring up an interesting point, because like when you're doing a drawing in Fusion, you're generally applying the constraints either with whatever gets applied automatically or whatever makes the drawing easiest to draw. So when you modify things down the line, it doesn't always modify correctly, right? We're talking about things like a big example I can think of off the top of my head is using horizontal and vertical constraints instead of perpendicular constraints. Because if you don't plan from the beginning, I might have to tilt this. That's going to be a nightmare to go back. And being able to draw stuff and then have it automatically parameterized, especially post hoc, is pretty good too. Also, biggest weakness of Fusion is probably that it's hard to predict what will happen when you change a variable. If in parametric design, changing a variable should always change exactly what you expect it to change. Nothing else should ever break. Basically, no matter what, with no exceptions, changing any variable to any value should not require you to do any manual rework at all. And I understand the constraints that the Fusion team are under. It's not like OpenSCAD where you have to, by its nature, define how the object is constructed, conceptually. So I'm sure they're doing the best they can, but it causes stuff like if you, if I punch too many holes in a surface, right, then it changes the name of that face, and then the drawing I had on that face loses its reference plane. And when I set a new reference plane, it takes all the projected geometry and converts it to fixed, which means I now need to spend an hour every time I change that surface. And stuff like that could be interesting, because instead of trying to have a bunch of engineers in a room figure out all possible ways to rectify people changing stuff retroactively, you could have a system figure out what people are expecting to happen based off what they do. Right. Yeah. This is the time you want the big data. I guess I should have said what I meant to add before was big data is largely useless to humans. We aren't capable of thinking statistically. So you give a person a bunch of data, they'll use it for motivated reasoning. There's no way around this. It's etched into the human condition. Yep. But if you feed that into a system designed to make decisions the way humans do, you can create very powerful automation tools, which I think is in that respect is very interesting.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I think it's something that, I don't know, I was talking to my father-in-law about this recently, right? And, Chat GPT had just come out and he just threw his hands up. He's like, no one's ever going to have a job again. And I was like, I mean, yeah, you might have fewer copy editors, for example, but you're still going to need copy editors.
Oh, lots of people are going to lose their jobs. Right?
For sure. But it's not the same. It's like there are always going to be engineers, like unless something totally new comes out, it's like there's always going to need to be somebody there kind of pulling the levers, right? There's always going to need to be somebody making decisions. And like you said, being creative, like you have to, these models can't come up with something out of nothing, right? Like you've got to, you need a human being to drive things.
It's tricky.
Something I wanted to bring up, I don't know if we're going to include this or not, but you mentioned earlier where you were talking about Kickstarter crowdfunded things and how these companies came in and said, not only can you not use a rendering, you can't just use a mock-up. Like you have to have a working prototype. Right. A lot of people don't know this, but that used to be the case for patents in the US. There were these models you had to make. And like, I think it would solve a lot of the problems with patent trolling.
My opinion on patents is, first off, you have to submit a functional implementation. Mm-hmm. And your ability to enforce your patent should be proportional to the degree to which your finished product resembles your sample. The second thing is, I think after you receive your patent, you should be given a certain amount of time. I think it should be, I would prefer 2 years, but sensibly it should probably be closer to 4 or 5. Yeah. You must make a good faith effort to commercialize this product to the odd, and like in your patent, you should have to declare who you intend to sell this to. Mm-hmm. So you can't change your market afterwards either. That's also very important. Yeah. You don't get control of the idea. You get right? Because what a patent should be giving you is, I have a business model that requires me to have exclusive access to this piece of technology.
Yeah.
So you are given a temporary monopoly to play out that business model. If you have a different business model, you got to submit a different patent.
Yeah.
The intention is, the government's job is not to help you make money. The government's job is to improve society. And the reason we have systems like this is because you get to improve society by making a bunch of money, which makes people want to do it. But just being able to write down an idea on a sheet of paper, as long as your lawyers are high powered enough, lock everyone out of making anything similar to it for 20 years is ludicrous.
Yeah. Now, I had some friends that went on and moved on from this company to a couple other companies that'll go unnamed, and they quit those places after 2-3 months. And I asked them, well, that sounds like a dream job. Why would you leave there? We're just patent trolls. All we do is sort of like kind of come up with things, and we make these like really dumb ramshackle like kind of things that kind of look like prototypes, and we put them on a shelf, and a lawyer comes in and jots everything down, and then we're on to the next thing. And really, they're just there in case somebody.
I'll admit, many of my clients were similar. Were similar plays. It makes it easier to enforce a patent if you can show. Pardon me. It makes it easier to enforce a patent if you can show a good faith attempt to bring it to market.
Yeah.
It definitely exists. But like, I used to get this question all the time from clients, like, when's the right time to bring it to market? And I always get asked myself constantly, right? Why don't you patent the stuff you make? A patent is not the best protection, right? A patent isn't great protection. In part because it's a way of saying it. A patent is like a patent is like a concealed carry permit, right? It gives you the ability to exact something really nasty on someone, but that's of no value unless you have the ability to do it and the willingness to do it. And on top of that, it's not the best way to keep someone from, just the same way a lot of issues that people think will be solved with a concealed carry permit could instead be solved by words, for instance, or avoiding situations that, could put you in that sort of danger. Same way as a patent, a lot of the things people expect to get out of a patent could be also obtained better by like having a trustworthy brand name, right? Having a product people enjoy using, having something like an Internet of Things service that has nothing to do with the product, right? People could buy whatever product they want, but only you provide the support or the back end for it.
Totally. You're doing something nobody else is doing, right? Like I could imagine we could take this as a.
But bear in mind, if your thing is a good business, very soon other people will be doing it.
Right. But like you said, having a brand behind it, having like a community behind it, that's a big thing. You know what I mean? Like, I can imagine if you're selling your keyboards, for example, or your heads up display or whatever it is, the fact that it came from you has value all its own. And the fact that like you've got a community of people using it, right? So
that what you just said is very interesting. What you said is very interesting because this is it's a very, all right, this is a bit of a tricky concept. We don't really have the word, what's the way of saying it? Our business culture, now, our modern business culture doesn't really have the words to describe this, but there are strategies that are extremely successful, but can never make you a multimillionaire, right? There are strategies that can massively increase a person's chances of making far more than they would working for someone else, but will never make them a world famous amount of money or fame. For instance, on my YouTube channel, right? My YouTube channel has I try to avoid making videos that are too advanced or too beginner friendly, right? Which means neither of those is ever like the extremes are where you blow up, right? But if you're somewhere in the middle, you have this vastly underserved group of people who are really dedicated to what they do. On top of that, I use humor, right?
Yeah. Humor. You're very good at that, by the way. Your videos crack me up, man. You're really funny in your videos.
the thing about humor though is that strong emotions. First off, strong emotions always cut both ways.
Yeah.
If you're making people laugh, you're making people angry.
Yeah.
No jokes will ever be funny to everyone.
Right.
Right. So if you use humor, you sharply increase how much many people like you and your stuff. And it creates an advantage that no one else can really. It's very difficult for other people to have because it's hard to it makes a style it's harder to copy. Like don't get me wrong, like I try to keep everything the right amount of highbrow and lowbrow. But I mean, another thing is I've had a lot of requests to cut out the crap because people want to use my stuff in classrooms. My videos are deliberately not educational.
Right.
It's very important. If you learn something, it's purely by accident. Because again, you can't watch too much entertainment or you can't watch too much education back to back. Same way you can't watch too much, entertainment back to back. One of them rots your brain, the other is like, I can't take it anymore. I'm sick of this. It's these strategies, the reason that matters is because it's very important I don't make a lot of videos, right? So it's very important that I get solid numbers for all my videos that last over a very long period of time. My videos are supposed to have extremely long lifespans. Yeah. And I think they do. Like I was talking to Things the other day, and they say they still are getting tons and tons of clicks from the first videos I made that featured models on Things. The important part is that strategy cannot make you huge because none of my videos are ever going to go viral. If one does, it's by chance, but I've never had a video go viral. A lot of people do YouTube. Like this is what sinks them. They're trying to serve they're trying to serve two masters. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to serve two masters, right? Fame and money. And it's neither of them. Like you should be serving yourself and your audience.
Yeah.
And whether you're famous for that or not, like it's a stupid goal because you have no control over it. You can't decide to be famous.
Serving yourself and your audience is sort of the core of what you do, right? It's like that's sort of the motivation behind the work you're doing. So why did you choose Fusion for yourself, and why did you think Fusion was the best tool for the audience?
So
you're big on open source. Like you've got a lot of really cool open source projects. You're clearly a believer in that for a lot of like philosophical reasons.
And also practical reasons. Like not, don't get me wrong here. I'm no bleeding heart. Well, the truth is I was using so why am I using Fusion? I was using Fusion long before I started YouTube. It's just the best, at least from all the stuff I've tried, it's just the best for prototypes. Before it, I used OpenSCAD, and OpenSCAD, it's also very good for prototypes, but it's very, very limiting, especially when you're not great with the maths, because I'm the dumb. The reason Fusion is so important in prototyping is the ability to retroactively change the design. It is critical.
Yeah.
You will never get a prototype correct anywhere near the first time, and every prototype has to interact with other stuff. So like the ability to go back in time and like change the dimensions of a board, change where you position a cutout, change a threaded, change like a heat set insert to a pocket nut, and not have to constantly add new stuff into it, not have to constantly stack operation on operation, is just an absolute game changer, especially when you're really trying to nail something down. It's every once in a while, like I'm really struggling to get something, to get some dimensions working, right? So I'll just really struggle to make something work. So like I'll just set parameters and like open up the parameters window, change 3 to 5, export STL, start printing, change 5 to 7, print that on the other one. Just run them all off at once.
So this is Shop Talk, and we have to talk about your shop. When I think of your shop, I just kind of think of gridfinity everywhere. It's just like every drawer you open, everything you pull out, and you're trying to like, find something. It's just like, there's just this beautiful little organized kind of modular. Yeah, there you go. See,
well, it is kind of gridfinity. I wouldn't say everywhere.
Yeah.
Because gridfinity, the major weakness of gridfinity is it's not good for large stuff.
Right.
But yeah, most of these drawers have gridfinity. There's a set over here. They're actually where I put the monitor that I'm looking at you on should also have another Gridfinity. And the plan was when I'm done with done eating the chocolate Gridfinity that I made for my last episode, I'm just going to take that base plate, which is not chocolate, and expand my Gridfinity system. But it turns out there's a finite amount of chocolate a human can eat in one day.
Yeah, without dying.
Yeah, there's Gridfinity all over the place.
So what's how do you approach your shop, right? You had, I assume, a smaller space when you were in the New York area.
This is supposed to be shop talk, isn't it? So my shop has a bit of a weird set of constraints because shop is a bit of a weird set of constraints because it's the place I build stuff, right? So it does have to be laid out very practically and pragmatically. And I'm very particular with how I like to lay stuff out. I think it's very important, for instance, that you can see as much as possible, that stuff isn't stacked on top or hidden behind other stuff. My idiosyncratic way of doing it. But it's also a studio. And it needs to look the way people want it to look. Now, it's still got to express some creativity, right? It has to be my workshop, but it's very important that it looks like what people think my workshop would look like, or it'll be distracting. So, all kinds of constraints have to do this. All kinds of constraints have to go into this. For instance, anything that's messy, right? Like anything that like boards that won't fit in a Gridfinity that have to stick out. Those have to be in a place I'm unlikely to point a camera at. Parts that, what's the way of saying it? Like tools that, just stuff like electric screwdrivers that can kind of distract people because, they think like, oh, wow, look how precious this guy is. He won't even screw his own screws. I want that stuff to only come into frame when it's relevant. Parts that this happens tons of different ways. Stuff like cords, right? There are no cords visible, even though I use a lot of tools that have. There's a cord right there in the corner, but like wound up cords on stuff like hot glue guns, heat guns, power drills, right? None of those can be in view because people don't like seeing cords. It stresses them out. All these things. On top of that, most of all 3 rooms of this workshop have to be empty space because you got to position a camera a certain distance from stuff. You got to be able to put the lights where you need them. So it is a studio as well as a workshop. This is especially a problem with the 3D print room because even though I could easily fit like a dozen printers in there, it's only got 6 because that's the maximum I can fit in there and point a camera at without things looking cluttered or busy. That said, I made this mistake. I made this mistake before. I made it too clean, right? Brooke might remember the first location. I specifically tried to move everything out of the way, so everything would be on white workbench with like maybe a couple tools visible in the background, and it just wasn't what people were expecting to see. People want to see a little bit of chaos.
Yeah, the colors help with the chaos too. Like you've got this kind of orange, purple, green thing going on that also makes you very distinct when you show up in like searches and YouTube and stuff like that.
Making the show colorful was extremely important.
Yeah,
and if you're really observant, you'll notice it's rarely the lights that are colored.
Yeah,
everything's very brightly lit white, and it's the stuff that's colored.
Yeah.
And that is because I have a very difficult time staying on script and giving a perfect delivery. We often have to cut different sentences together to, make and if the lights are changing all the time, right? If I'm using like me lifting up the chocolate from this shot and me pouring the thing in from that shot, and the lighting is changing the whole time, people are going to realize that what looked like me picking something up and putting something in it was actually 8 takes.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, I'm not surprised, man. Like you've carefully considered every detail here, just like you do in your projects.
I think it's very important in general, right? Like you're at the end of the day, like, what's the the saying is like a bad worker blames their tools.
Yeah.
But a good worker can certainly be held back by their tools.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a workshop is basically the tool of tools, right? Your workshop is sort of like, it's the fulcrum that combines it all together, right? You could have all the finest tools around. Like you could have like a custom made Teflon knife that's perfect for, like, you can scrape any sticker off any surface in one. But if you have to like walk up to, you have to walk up to your shelf, lift up one bin, pull out that bin, and grab that knife, you're just going to reach for a screwdriver and scrape it off. So yeah. And on top of that, like the stuff like cleaning up, right? Very important for both the project and for the show, right? Yeah. I don't have to clean things up perfectly. Like, people are okay with a little clutter; they expect it. But I still can't be so messy that it looks filthy or it distracts people. So being able to clean the place up in a hurry is important. And let's be honest, everyone hates cleaning their workbench. How often have you seen a picture of someone's project on their workbench and everything is back where it's supposed to be?
Yeah.
If you look at my projects, actually fairly often, because I do try as hard as I can to put everything back where it's supposed to be. But you can't do that unless everything has a specific place it's supposed to be.
Right.
If every time you clean up, you have to figure out where to put everything, you're not going to clean up. That's the smart thing to do.
So I got to know, zombie apocalypse is here. You got to start over. What's your, how do you do it? What's your first tool?
Do you want the serious answer or the silly answer?
Both.
Because the serious answer is a still. Right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because you're gonna need, you're gonna need alcohol, to disinfect wounds. Yeah. You're gonna need it to disinfect wounds. You're going to need it to
as a currency.
I have my answers right here. Oh yeah. So you'll need to decontaminate wounds. You'll need it to preserve calories through the winter, and to get post-apocalyptically wasted, or as I plan to call it, get thunderdomed.
That's great.
And I ain't getting through an entire post-apocalypse sober.
Thoughts. Well done.
But if you mean like if I lost all my workshop in like a really bad flood, for instance, first tool I need is a computer. You can make anything else with a computer. The second is a 3D printer, because people expect me, because I'm, I gotta make the content. And then I remember that I don't have a camera, so I should get one of those too.
Well, the 3D printer can help you with the camera, as can the computer, right?
In a true post-apocalyptic situation, something that's very useful to have is going to be voltage regulators. Simply because after a period of time, every lithium battery on Earth is going to discharge too much to be useful, right? So there will be lots of useful data. And lots of useful data and features in the many devices that are going to be literally everywhere, but there aren't going to be any batteries to run them off of. So you'll need the ability to like take pedal power or solar power and regulate it down to 4.2 volts, so you can run all this old technology.
All right, Zach. So we went over by an hour. I could easily do 2 more.
Well, thanks so much for having me. If you want to watch my videos, I don't know why you would, but you can go to youtube.com/Zack Freedman. Yeah, normally I end these episodes with, normally I end my episodes with thanks for watching and I'll see you in the future. But I think this time it should be more thanks for watching and I hope to see what you make in the future.
Great conversation, man. Thanks so much for coming. Hey everyone, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay up to date with all things Shop Talk. If you're ready to try Fusion for yourself, find the link in our description.